Welcome back, Honors. So, y'all just left, and don't mind me, I'm just putting a timer on. I like to try and stick to about 15 minutes at most. I think anything over that starts to just get a little aggressive and y'all start to check out. But, like I've said before, remember, flipping in an essence is we try to review a lot in class, and on days we don't have flips, we try to go over notes, but then days we do have flips, we try to review, so we make sure we're having an active amount of memory and a collaboration of discussion. Much like a college course in a way, except instead of just making you read out of a textbook, I'm actually creating a video that is like an online lecture base, right? So anyway, now the 7 time periods in the histories of the lives, or the history of the lives of Egyptians, right? So let's get into it. We started jotting this down in class before I got cut off by the bell, but these right here are not Boba Fett, but those are the 7 ancient, keyword is ancient, Egyptian time periods. What's probably good to do right now is to pause it, jot those down up in the top right-hand corner. Some of you are like, where is it? Up in here in the right-hand corner. You see where I'm zooming in right there? That's them right there. Archaic, Old Kingdom, First Intermediate, Middle Kingdom, Second Intermediate, New Kingdom, Third Intermediate, right? So, well, let's get after it. We're going to start off, of course, talking about the Archaic period, right? So Archaic Egypt is best defined as the old way or an original use of something. Now, that's defining the word archaic itself, all right? The word archaic is like original use, right? Now, really quickly, though, the Archaic period in Egypt is best symbolized by the unification of Egypt under, who is that again? Very nice job, Magrino. Like it. Under this guy right here. And this is his death mask, but he goes by the name Menes, right? So, Menes unites Upper and Lower Egypt together, creating one almost central-based government, right? So, but he creates one unified empire, something the Mesopotamians struggled to do for thousands of years. Does anybody remember who actually was the first ones to do it, even though it was very, very short-lived? Good job, Dean. The Akkadians, right? The Akkadians. Very, very nice. All right, so anyway, but going into it, now we're going to transfer into our Old Kingdom, right? The Old Kingdom is the first of 3 kingdom periods, right? Now, really, really quickly, just so I can make sure my dates and history are right, I'm going to use my separate screen to double check on the years for this in Old Kingdom Egypt, because there's nothing worse than being quoted by an honors kid and being like, that's not right, it was actually 2500 BC. All right, well, anyway, the Old Kingdom ranges from 2686 BC to 2134 BC. Now, it is the first of the 3 kingdom periods. To give you a heads up, the kingdom periods are all characterized by cultural growth and prosperity. Money was made in kingdom periods. Art was made in kingdom periods. The cultural stuff that you like as Egyptian is all kingdom period oriented, right? The intermediates, on the other hand, are always characterized by hardship and death. Anyway, but in the Old Kingdom, some of the most important events that happen is, first of all, it spans the 3rd to 6th dynasties. There are 32 total dynasties, as according to Dean. Thank you very much. Appreciate that the other day. Now, so 3rd to 6th dynasties. It goes from 2686 BC to 2181 BC. It starts under this guy named Djoser. Now, some of the honors kids like to call him DJ Ozer, right? Like he's like at an EDM club and he's just like spinning stuff inside of the pyramid. Now, anyway, but anyway, he is considered the first god king of Egypt. He was the first completely legitimate base of a theocratic government, right? Theocracy, again, remember, where our religion and our government are 2 intertwined concepts, okay? So, King Djoser, though, Pharaoh Djoser, does probably the most influential thing that the Egyptians ever had, and one of the most culturally identifiable things that the Egyptians ever did. He centralized power. Put a star next to that right now. He centralized their power, right? He actually came in and he said, what is the point of ruling over a fractured government? He didn't actually say that, but you understand what I'm saying. What is the point of ruling over a fractured government? And he did this by turning each city-state into what you would call a nome. He had the nome system, N-O-M-E, right? What we may call a state today. So the basis of centralized government that the United States of America uses actually started in the 2000s BC with the Egyptians. Some people are always walking around like, Mr. Terry, why do I need to know this stuff? Sounds a lot like Taylor over there in the back corner. Now, you need to know it because it literally impacts us on a daily basis. Had they not came up with this style of government, we probably wouldn't be using it at all. It's a successful centralization system. You have separate nomes or states or provinces or counties that report back to their central government and through it makes tax collection simpler. It makes ruling simpler. It creates a bureaucratic system, which we'll get to later. All right, anyway, now, smooth move, Joser. I like it. But this is what Egypt looked like after it was centralized. All the red lines, those are the separate nomes, right? And it spans the length of the Nile. It goes all the way down. Down here, you start to get into the Nubian area. There were different periods where the Nubians actually fought the Egyptians and where they unified with the Egyptians and a lot of different stuff. But the Nubians were very well known for being amazing archers and also militaristically very, very solid. So anyway, and then, let's back it on up. And this also right here is actually one of Djoser's, come on. This is one of Djoser's busts, right? A bust of Djoser, which I love Egyptian style art. I love it. I love the, just the thematics of it. I think, the skill needed at the time is just really amazing. During the Old Kingdom, though, also was when the pyramids started to actually, play out. So the early phases of Egyptian architecture actually began here. Now, a lot of people, when they originally, discuss Egyptian architecture, the only thing they talk about are the Great Pyramids of Giza. Well, something you need to understand about the Great Pyramids of Giza, they are very, very, very newer, right? The Great Pyramids of Giza, let me double check and make sure I'm saying this right. Great Pyramids of Giza, built date. Here we go. And it's completed around 2560. All right, yeah, so the earliest forms of Egyptian, there we go. The earliest forms of Egyptian architecture actually span from this period. Now, the Great Pyramids of Giza were built during the Old Kingdom, but the earliest forms are actually something like the medium pyramid, the bent pyramid, the pyramid of Djoser, and the temple of Djoser. This right here is the temple of Djoser. Now, the neatest thing about some of these different architectural styles is the fact that they're very reminiscent of a lot of Western civilizations. You have arches that would be coined by the Romans later on. You have actually brick-laid walls that the Greeks would actually use avidly and when they would start their cultures on the Isles of Crete, right? So then you also have, there we go. There it is. Then you also have some of the earliest forms of the pyramids. This one right here is that's the Pyramid of Djoser, and it looks more like a tiered cake. Almost Mesopotamian, like a ziggurat in a sense, right? And then you also have the bent pyramid. I wonder where that got its name from. And then you also have, lastly, this one is the median pyramid, all right? So these different styles of building are just very, very culturally receptive. Now, there's something missing from one of these that I thought I had. One of the other big things about old school Egyptian architecture that started in the Old Kingdom is this thing called an obelisk, right? An obelisk is a spire. You know of an obelisk best from the Washington Monument. Very, very nice. I got cut off by Sam there, but I like your style, Sam. Now, anyway, so as we continue forward, though, the Old Kingdom kept pushing forward. The construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza happened during this period. The Sphinx was constructed during this period. They were both the construction of the Great Pyramid of Giza and the Sphinx actually started under a guy named Khufu and was completed about 2586 BC, right? Now, this, though, showed the gains of architecture from the beginnings of the Old Kingdom. Once they actually start pushing forward, they leaped forward in art and architecture very, very quickly. Now, their art also began to progress with first full-form sculptures actually in representative art the world had ever seen. So this, of course, being one of the Great Pyramids of Giza. I always tell kids about this every year, and I think I already told you guys this, but in case one of your parents are listening, it's a really, really cool little factoid. The Great Pyramids of Giza used to have smooth sides to them. However, you can only see the remaining smooth area at the very, very top of this pyramid. Reason being is due to the fact that they harvested a lot of this limestone to build the modern-day city of Cairo with it. So this happens to a lot of ancient ruins. Parts of the Parthenon were harvested to build other parts of Athens. The Colosseum in Rome looks the way that it does because after Rome fell, their stone thieves would come in at night and actually steal the iron bars and a lot of the stone off it and sell back to Christians to build mausoleums and new churches with. So very, very cool stuff. But yeah, so we could have taken better care of these. But this right here is the Sphinx. Nose fell off, we believe, somewhere around the 1850s when Napoleon invaded. Big urban myth is that actually one of Napoleon's cannons shot the nose off of it. We don't think that happened. We actually think that it was something very, very minor, probably windstorms or something like that, or just natural erosion. Now, this is really good, though. The very first full-form sculptures also popped up in Egypt. Some of you are like, well, what's the big difference between those? Weren't Mesopotamians making stuff like that? They actually weren't. Mesopotamians specialized in something known as recessive art, all right? Something more similar to this right here, where actually the figures come forward out of a piece of stone, whereas Egyptian art actually made out of different types of rock and stone, like onyx, for example. Not onyx from Pokemon. Calm down, Emily. Now, anyway, so they would actually do full-form sculptures, proportionally sized sculptures with the right heights and also sometimes life-size. So very, very, very good stuff. However, though, the first intermediate period is then going to pop up around 2181 to 2055 BC. Now, you'll notice that a lot of these intermediate periods are kind of short because they're characterized by hardship. You don't want hardship for 100 years, right? So the thing that happened in the first intermediate, though, is, of course, civil war, right? So political power was divided. Upper and Lower Egypt actually broke apart. The kingdom had a massive civil war between the two different areas. Temples and tombs were pillaged and robbed, and a lot of people believe that this is due to support of a different king or pharaoh at the time. And so very, very big time hardship, a lot of war. Now, Lower Egypt, though, is going to end up conquering Upper Egypt and is going to reunify the land. But here's the big question. How does this whole thing about a theocratic government conflict with the ideas of a civil war? You don't need to write that question, but it's actually just a really good question. Good answer, Harrison. Very nice. It conflicts because, hypothetically speaking, if the king is a god king of something, right? If he is the god king of your empire, why are people copping an attitude with him? Shouldn't he just be able to, like, smite them or easily move them or whatever? We'll get back to the answer to that question here in a minute. But, of course, this is one of our pieces of evidence from the Civil War. It actually documents some of the conflicts between the two empires. This right here, I love putting this up here. This is what an average Egyptian officer would be wearing by comparison to an Egyptian regular soldier. Their tools were typically made out of, like, soft metals, either bronze, sometimes gold-plated, only if you were really, really wealthy, though. But typically made out of bronze, and they were very soft, all right? They didn't hold edges for very long. Also, though, the Egyptians are going to take from the Assyrians the ideas of chariots, and they're going to use those in battle as well. And also developing the ideas of early longbows and archery and things like that in their military. Now, the Middle Kingdom, though, is then going to see a giant rebirth of intelligence and government. Ooh. Now, 11th and 12th dynasties are going to come in and do those bad boys. So I know we said 3rd to 6th for Old Kingdom, and then 11th to 12th. So you're talking about several families that were deposed and moved throughout that entire area of time. So the biggest impact of the Middle Kingdom was this guy named Senusret. Senusret had the most impact as a pharaoh during this time period. He actually worked to establish Osiris as one of the chief gods to explain the Nile and the authority of the pharaoh, and also created the first effective bureaucratic system. This is so important. Underline Senusret, underline bureaucracy. We use a bureaucracy every flippin' day. Every day, and you just don't even realize it, all right? Let me give you an example of how a bureaucracy works. Again, find my red. All right, so anyway, a bureaucracy, ironically enough, is much like a pyramid in a sense, right? So let me get you a little bit closer. Anyway, now, so a bureaucracy works kind of like this, where if you have your pyramid right here, it's all about power, okay? You have your pharaoh up here at the top, and then beneath him you have his priests. And now you'll notice as the levels go down, the number of people in each group begin to grow. Underneath them, you have their scribes. Underneath the scribes, you have the tax collectors. And underneath them, you have the peasants. And then all the way at the bottom, you have the slaves, right? So it's a way of effectively spreading power throughout a government, right? There's a pure bureaucracy. We use them all the time. Look at the state and local representation. Look at your national representation, right? The best one to look at is the state representation. You have your governor, who is your chief official of every state, and then underneath him, you have county representatives, and you have the state house and legislatures, and they all report to one another, right? So a bureaucracy is a multi-leveled government. Not to be confused, though, with something as simple as like a, I don't know, just not to be confused, right? Multi-level. Oh, I know what I was going to say. Not to be confused with a hierarchy. Hierarchy is a ranking of power. Bureaucracy is the government functions in multiple levels. All right, so, all right. Let's take a break from all that time stuff real quick, and let's talk about one part of life as an Egyptian, and then we're going to cut it for today. All right. Now, really, really quick. Harrison picked up on the problem with intermediate periods and the theocratic government, right? The confliction there. Well, a lot of it has to do with the fact that the people began to depend on the pharaoh as a god and keep the balance of this thing called Mot, right? Mot. The Egyptian principle of Mot is all about harmony and balance, right? So Mot is often symbolized as the goddess Isis with her wings spread, right? So she actually, if she tips one way or another, the balance will be thrown off. The feather of truth, of course, is like sitting inside of her crown. And a lot of different theocratic visual representations can be seen in this very simple piece of art. Now, people, though, believe that every pharaoh has to follow ethical backgrounds to keep Mot in balance. Let me make sure I don't have anything up here. Yeah, I do. All right, so, and what I mean by that is that the pharaoh is required to keep his people happy, because if he's not keeping them happy, that means that the gods are about to choose a new ruler, all right? And we'll talk about that when it comes to civil wars and overthrows and things like that tomorrow, all right? So we're going to stop there because we're like flirting with 15 minutes, but I've really, really enjoyed it. I hope you all have a great rest of your evening. I'll see you guys tomorrow, Honors.